that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the show. And it's dependent on us. What will be the outcome of the show? The cause is our tefillas, and the result of our tefillas is what's going to happen.
Wherever you get your podcasts from, or our own website, prismoftorah.com. This is The Prism of Torah with Rabbi Asaf Aaron Prisman.
Shalom Uvracha. I would like to share with you a simple but deep idea brought down by Rav Shimon Schwab Zatzal in his sefer called Me'ein Beis HaShoeva. It says in our parsha, in Perek Mem Aleph Pasuk Ches, that suddenly in the morning, Pharaoh was in shock. He woke up in distress. He couldn't take it. He didn't understand what is this dream that he's dreaming about. We know there were two dreams, one of the same, where one of them was the 7 skinny cows that ate the fat cows, and they remained skinny. But it seems like the skinny ate the fat cows, and that was very disturbing to him. Ask Rav Shimon Schwab the obvious question. It was just a dream, so it was 2 dreams. But still, what was so disturbing that he couldn't take it anymore? What's the idea behind it? And he answers, because at the time, he understood that the way the world works is that whoever's stronger, both in quantity and quality, they're the ones that are going to survive. As the famous idea, the survival of the fittest. And hence, based on this concept, he was always calm. He had no worries, not from other nations, because Mitzrayim, Egypt, was the biggest empire at the time. They had witchcraft, they had a strong army, but also he wasn't worried from within the nation that people will come and rebel against him, because even if people would do that, he knew they would be the minority, and always the majority will win over. Suddenly, his whole philosophy collapsed in front of his face when he realizes in his dream it seems not to be like that. The 7 skinny cows ate the 7 fat cows. How did that happen? And hence, he couldn't take it anymore, and in the morning as he woke up, abruptly, he called all the top people, the Chartumei Mitzrayim, all the biggest experts, and said, I have to tell you what happened. You have to figure out what's going on behind the scenes in this dream. And nothing appeased him until, of course, we know that Yosef interpreted the dream and calmed him down, and it made sense to him. Says Rav Shimon Schwab that you see that yes, it's not all about kochi ve'otzem yadi. It's not about who's gonna beat who. It's gonna be the stronger people. No, not necessarily. Maybe that's the optical illusion we see, but that's not necessarily true. Rav Shimon Schwab even connects it to Chanukkah, and he says perhaps, usually, that is why we read this parsha during Chanukkah time. This year, it's not the case because it's a leap year, but usually we read Parshas Mikeitz in Chanukkah. Perhaps it's because of this idea, because in Chanukkah, what we say every day on Chanukkah, we say to Hashem, wow, you saved us. Masarta, giborim biad chalashim. People that are courageous and strong, you let them fall into the hands of the weaker people, which was the Cheshmonaim. And it's the same idea. And what's behind the idea? Behind the idea is it's evident that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the show. And it's dependent on us. How the show, what will be the outcome of the show? The cause is our tefillas, and the effect and the result of our tefillas is what's going to happen. What's the proof to that? There was no rain in the world until HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Adam HaRishon, the first person, and when he was davening to Hashem for rain, then the rain could come, because that is the spiritual DNA of the world. Everything in our worlds and the worlds above us, it's all dependent on the avodah of the Yidden. How are we davening? How are we doing ma'aseh mitzvahs? How are we learning Torah, Chesed, etc., etc.? And that is how the world runs. Now, is what Pharaoh couldn't understand. But we know that's the truth. The Siftei Chaim asks a question. If you look at tefillah that we do in Al Anisim, we say, Masarta giborim be'ad chalashim, rabim be'ad me'atim, tzme'im be'ad teorim, reshaim be'ad tzadikim. And he asks, if you think about it, at first glance, some of these defy logic. You would have thought there's no way the weak would beat the mighty. You would have thought that the minority will not beat the majority. But yes, that's exactly what happened. But then you move on, and the next clause says, and you gave the Rishaim to fall into the arms of Tzadikim. That makes sense. Isn't that the way the world runs? It's thanks to the Tzadikim that overcome the Rishaim. And the Siftei Chaim answers, really, they're all the reason. All of what we say in Al Anisim is the actual reason why Bnei Israel, the Chashmonaim, were able to beat the Yavanim. And that's because It's thanks to the fact we were weaker. It's thanks to the fact that we were the minority, that there was no room to make the mistake of kochi ve'otzem yadi asali et hachayil hazeh. It wasn't us that won. It was because HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided, based on our spirituality level, that we will deserve to win. Just like it makes sense that tzaddikim would beat the Rishaim, the righteous will beat the wicked, so too, because it's so obvious, it's not thanks to us, that to our physical strength, that we will beat them, because it was evident we didn't have physical strength compared to them, and hence there was no room to make the mistake, and we turned to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we knew that it's only thanks to Hashem, and therefore that is exactly what promised defeating the Yavanim. And that is how the world runs. How true is this today in our days, that we have to realize with a lot of ishtadlus that we're doing, but we have to always turn to Hashem, and please, we have to daven to Hashem, do extra mitzvahs, extra tehillim, like the Welt is doing right now, to ensure, to get us out of this dangerous time that we are a part of. For Jews all around the world, especially for the soldiers right now in the front lines. Chanukkah very much so represents this idea, because we know Chazal teach us that the reason they came and stopped, and the Yavanim came, the Greeks came, and halted the Beis HaMikdash from functioning, is because we didn't take the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash seriously. Hitrashlut ba'avodah. But we did a tikkun for that, because we showed HaKadosh Baruch Hu how much we were moiser nefesh, to do our best to bring it back. And even though we were able to use that little pach of shemen, and even though the shemen was tameh, and we're allowed to, because tu mahutra betzibur, there are certain times when everyone's tameh impure, you're allowed to use impure shemen, but that wasn't good enough. We showed Hashem we wanted to be perfect. And based on that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the miracle of 8 days. And everyone asked the question, the Beis Yosef's famous kasha, why is Chanukkah 8 days? It should be really only 7 days, because one day it makes sense that that oil should have lasted. So why is it 8 days? There are many answers to this question, but one answer is based on the fact that oil gets consumed and turns into fire, and is something that's flammable, that in itself represents nature, and that's also a miracle. We have to remember that Teva itself, nature, is one big miracle. And we mentioned this several times, that there's a hint at it, because Ha-Teva, the nature, is in Gematria 86, the same as Elokim. Aleph Lamed, Hey, Yud Mem is also 86. Nature is an optical illusion, but really it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And everything that happens, we have to realize, is part of this big plan coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We see this also in our parsha itself. The beginning of the parsha, Mikeitz shnatayim yamim. If you just look at the order of events that happened, we would say, oh, an amazing thing. Finally, Yosef gets freed out of jail. But Chazal tell us it's not exactly like that. You think he was let out of jail because of that Pharaoh needed someone to interpret his dream? It's quite the contrary. It's only because it was time for Yosef to leave jail, HaKadosh Baruch Hu orchestrated that Pharaoh will have a dream, and that Yosef will be in command later on. But really, Chazal tell us, he should have really been let out 2 years before. And the only reason it got pushed off to another 2 years, says Rabbeinu Bechaya, exactly to the day, and that's why it says the word days over there. The reason being that on Yosef's very high level, he shouldn't have put so much faith into the Sa'am Ashkim and say, oh, please don't forget me. Twice he said to him, please don't forget me. And tell people how I know to interpret dreams. So Hashem made him forget. And Hashem said, for that you're going to have to stay another 2 years. Once again, you see the cause and effect are based on the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plan and based on how we act. And that's how the spiritual world affects the reality. If you look at the world with these glasses, everything changes. Everything has a new perspective. You could say that the brothers of Yosef went down to Egypt because there was a famine. But the other way of looking at it is HaKadosh Baruch Hu ensured there would be a famine to ensure that Bnei Yisrael come down to live in Egypt, so that the true redemption will come, so that they'll become a nation and get Matan Torah and Har Sinai and eventually go to Eretz Yisrael, etc., etc. As we know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked at the Torah and based on that, he created the world. To summarize this idea, that Tvunot by the Ramchal talks about it at length. There's a certain map that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, and the end result will always be the same. The shaila is up to us, how are we going to get to that end state, that end result? It's totally based on our actions. How are we going to act? If we act the way Hashem wants us to act, based on Torah and Mitzvah, like the Torah dictates to us, then the path will be more pleasant. I would like to add a true story that happened 2 weeks ago to my daughter's teacher. 2 weeks ago on Friday morning, there was a pigua in Yerushalayim, and she was one of the people that was badly injured. She had a 4-hour operation, and some tzaddikim go around to these people that were hit hard in the piguim, and they pretty much try to please them by giving them anything they request. So they went to this 24-year-old who is not yet married, and they asked her after a 4-hour operation to try to put a smile on her face. We're willing to give you anything you want. We'll try to do our best to meet your request. What would you like us to give you? And because she had such clarity as to what the purpose of life is, she didn't even flinch. It was so obvious what her request was. Her request was that her father's kollel get money to support the avrechim who are dedicating their lives to Torah, and they're not getting much money at all. And Baruch Hashem, this tzaddik was able to get a very big sum of money the next day already to her father for the kollel. It's an amazing thing to think of what she went through, and still she has this clarity of what life is all about. Yiratzoin, that similar to this lady, we will be able to have clarity of what life is all about, that everything's part of a big plan that Kadosh Baruch Hu has for us, and we can make the path a lot more pleasurable if we act accordingly to the way the Torah dictates us to act. Ben Adam lechaveiroi, noise bo'olim chaveiro, like a lot are doing now, to do our best to help the soldiers, to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu how we are united. We're trying to work together with having Hashem in the middle, Hashem-centric, and everyone work together to help each other out, to strengthen each other's kesher with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like David HaMelech says, life is all about kirvas Hashem, kirvas Elokim litoiv. What do we really want? To get close to Hashem. Yiratzon, that will be zoiche. Now the ending of the days of Chanukkah, and we're going into Parshas Mikeitz, which screams out this idea. Yiratzon, that will be zoiche, to live this idea, and be zoiche to have a pleasurable path to the end game that Hashem has planned us, which of course would lead b'mihra v'yameinu to Mashiach Tzidkenu, and to all of us being united in Olam Haba. Have a good Shabbos, and if you're listening to this while it's still Chanukkah, a freilichen Chanukkah.
This concludes another episode of The Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on The Prism of Torah.